Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Late Show. This is your host, Young Brando, live from Los Angeles. We are going to talk about a very interesting watch collection today. The kind of watches that we don't usually take on with our spotlight. A lot of fabulous stuff, gem sets, very extravagant, very flamboyant, just as it would befit, just as it would behoove someone like Sir Elton John. It turns out that after having moved out of his Atlanta home on Peachtree Road last year, he also decided to have an estate sale of sorts with Christie's specifically, and the collection includes a number of artworks, photographs, numerous objects, collectibles, stage costumes that belong to the person of Elton John, and also some 30 lots that have very interesting pieces as far as watches go. You'll see the usual suspects from Cartier, from Chopard, and from others, but also some more unpredictable stuff, you might say. So let's dive in. I think it was last year that he sold his condo on Peachtree Road, after which, by the way, he had named one of his probably least commercially successful albums with the title specifically Peachtree Road, I think from about 20 years ago, must be 2004. And I think he sold the condo for more than $7 million. It wasn't necessarily a matchbox, more than 13,000 square feet, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously, the place was covered with works of art and other objects. The grand piano that was part of the setting, I think, is also going on sale at Christie's in New York. The auction is taking place, I think, in the manner of half a dozen landmark sales between February 9th to the end of the month, between February 9th and the 28th. So from the 9th to the end of the month in February, I think some part of the sales is handled online. There will be some live events, and I believe a lot of the pieces of the collection will be on exhibition at Christie's Rockefeller between February 9 to the 21st. So let's take a quick peek. Whiskey Reaper, I see you as well. Nice to see you. I don't know if that was my fake Southern accent or my Borat, but hey. So I just sent the link. If you want me to put a particular focus on any of the items, feel free to send in the lot number with a super chat. Otherwise, feel free to just tune in and relax. We'll just take a quick peek first, and then dive right in with what I've selected to focus on. And we'll move from there. As you can see, they're almost all gem sets or bejeweled in some fashion. And a lot of the watches, as I mentioned before at the outset, are Cartier and Chopard. So brands that are more closely, more intimately associated with jewelry, but also make some great watches and very desirable pieces. But there are also some timepieces there, some wristwatches there that does show the unique horological flavor that Elton John's collection has, and that's always interesting to see. So I will start perhaps with those pieces, that are relatively unpredictable, and will build up to those who may be somewhat predictable but are still very interesting indeed. So here we're looking at a Chopard piece, which comes from their sporty Mille Miglia line. As you guys know, the owner of the company and the person who still leads the watches division, Karl Friedrich Schäufele, himself takes part in this event on an annual basis, at least on a regular basis, I should say. I don't check on it every year. And he usually co-pilots with his close friend and legendary race car driver Jackie Ickx as well. So Schäufele himself, who owns the company, who is kind of the patriarch of the family that owns the company, feels very strongly about this line as a gentleman driver himself. The line has usually very sporty chronographs. That seems to be the main focus. There are also different kinds of watches that have some design flavor that resonates, that echoes with the world of racing. And a lot of times these pieces are paired with rubber bands, some of which, in fact, look exactly like tires, right? So it's in a way very explicitly, overtly racing themed, but not in an untasteful way, I have to say. This is a model that was expressly made for Elton John, which was a limited edition, I believe, of 50 pieces. It's actually powered by a quartz movement. The case is rendered in 18 karat white gold. And set with both diamonds and sapphires. You can see how the lugs are set with diamonds, 3 distinct rows of stones on the bezel, with 1 row of diamonds and 2 rows of sapphires. Sapphires at the center of the dial. Diamonds that set each chronograph register. an opening for the date indicator at 4:30, heat blued leaf-styled hands for the hour and minutes, and a centrally deployed rhodium-plated chronograph seconds hand. I believe the Arabic numerals that serve as the hour markers also have a tint of blue in them, which of course continues that theme of silver and blue that visually distinguish this particular watch. As you can see from this profile, it is in fact the entire case and not just the frontal view that is set with gems, with diamonds specifically, the flanks of the case as well. And on the case back, you actually have Elton John's autograph, and I believe at least some of the proceeds, at least part of the proceeds, were going to Elton John's AIDS Foundation as well. This is number 4 out of 50. In white gold, Mille Miglia, Elton John, powered by a quartz movement, Chopin Mille Miglia chronograph in a case that measures 38.5 millimeters in diameter. The pre-auction estimate that Christie's provides for this chronograph is $8,000 to $12,000 in US dollars. Whiskey Reaper says, Elton John is a great musician, by far one of the best of our time. I am a fan of Rocket Man too. I'm not sure if I hold him in the same high esteem as you, Reaper. I don't think I'm as enthusiastic, but I do like his music. I don't remember skipping an Elton John track if and when it came up. So I do like it, but I don't necessarily seek it. And Van Lux invites us to taste the rainbow. I love that slogan. It's beautiful. Apparently, the watch is also matched with a déployant clasp in the same white gold, and it's bejeweled too. It's gem set as well with diamonds and sapphires, but unfortunately, no picture of it is provided here by Christie's, so we'll take that as read. Once again, the pre-auction estimate was set between $8,000 to $12,000 in US dollars. Apparently, the whole collection has been valued with an estimate around $10 million. Of course, that doesn't include a separate assessment for watches, but obviously we could more or less do that. I think most of the watches are right around $10,000, let's say a little more. So the estimate for the watches themselves is probably $500,000 roughly included in this collection. The other one that kind of surprised me, but also not really, was the Alangonzune. This is lot 916 for Saxonia's best, for Saxony's best. This is an Alangonzune Saxonia their perhaps purest, simplest, and still stunning range of dress watches. This particular piece is also of a smaller size in diameter, 34 millimeters from right around 2000, in 18 karat white gold, mounted on a leather strap and matched with an 18 karat white gold buckle as well. A black dial, diamond markers for the hours, which are doubled at 12 o'clock, with that distinct oversized date, double guichet at 12 o'clock as well. And that is counterposed with a subtly recessed subdial for seconds at 6 o'clock. As always, some beautiful and balanced use of typography by Lange in applying their signature across the line that cuts the dial in half between 9 and 3 o'clock. Black dial, sharp contrast with both the white metal of the case and, of course, the row of brilliant cut diamonds that set the bezel. And as always, there's a little bit of an asymmetry, a little bit of a quirk introduced into the mix with that distinct pusher for the quick correction of the dates that is set at 2 o'clock to give you some of that haptic feel, some of that tactile experience that characterize, that distinguish A. Lange und Söhne's timepieces. Alpha styled hands, rhodium plated and in white gold. Perfectly readable, elegant, smaller sized dress watch. Obviously, this is a watch that is much more on the feminine side for a mainstream taste. But if you have big enough balls, I'm sure you can wear it as a man too. This is the A. Lange und Söhne Saxonia reference 803031, white gold, 34 millimeters in diameter, with a black dial, oversized dates, seconds on the subdial, and a bezel set with diamonds. Lot number 916. Has a pre-auction estimate that ranges between 15 to 25,000 in US dollars. Another interesting piece. This one is probably the watch that stands out the most. If I were to speculate on it, I would say the unique design of the Sympathie or Sympathy case by Roger Dubuis may have been part of the intrigue for this watch for Elton John. But in either case, you guys know how obsessed I am with the Roger Dubuis Easy Diver as an entire range. There are a number of variations, but the standard version of it, the most common version of it, is the 46 millimeter diver. The time-only version with seconds on the subdial in stainless steel. There's also a chronograph version of the 46 millimeter that is built on the base of Lemania CH27, one of the most definitive hand-wound chronograph movements of the 20th century, as you know. There are also limited editions of the time-only in 43 millimeters and even sometimes 40 millimeters. There are jam set versions. There are those that are in precious metal, in stainless steel matched with a white gold bezel, which is the case here with the version that you're looking at from Sir Elton John's watch collection. But this is in fact the version that has a flying tourbillon right between 7 and 8 o'clock, or even around 6 to 8 o'clock even, with a slanted heat-blued second sand that pivots on that tourbillon cage. Flying tourbillon, as you know, or as you might know, I should say, is more difficult to execute, and also perhaps from an aesthetic standpoint, more desirable, you might say, because there's nothing such as a bridge that impedes your view, that interrupts your contemplation of the dynamic movements, the revolution of the tourbillon cage. You can see from the warmer shades of the bezel that it is rendered in a different material than the case. The bezel is in 18 karat white gold. The Sympathy case in this case is in stainless steel with its distinctive shape that is neither entirely a square nor exactly round, and with its three-pronged lugs. There's also a fixed carbon fiber detail here where the case connects to the rubber strap. True sports watch with 300 meters of a depth rating, sports activity watch. I really like the cobblestone pattern of the dials on these easy divers. Here it is a champagne color on the face of the watch that I think goes beautifully with the white gold bezel. And the hands are skeletonized in a way that would echo with that cobblestone pattern on the dial, and also inlaid with luminous material at or near the tip, again to enhance legibility in the dark. Roger Dubuis, as you know, has always distinguished himself as the Genevan watchmaker. So in fact, this is also a watch that is assembled, finished, and regulated up to that exacting standard, befitting of a Geneva seal, both on the movement and the case, as you can see here. Caliber RD02 flying tourbillon. A really beautiful and properly masculine piece, to the extent that I wouldn't really dare wearing this on a daily basis. 48 millimeters with such a distinctive case shape. It's just a monster of a watch, an absolute unit. Very beautiful. And to me, probably the most surprising part of this collection here. This is lot 921, Roger Dubuis Easy Diver Flying Tourbillon in stainless steel, 48 millimeters in diameter, with a white gold bezel, mounted on a rubber band, and with an estimated value that is set between 10 to 18,000. St. Peter, are you there still?
I believe so. Can you hear me?
Yes, it sounds a little scratchy, but I don't know if that's just something momentary. Can you speak again?
No, unfortunately, I think that'll be permanent.
That it will be permanent. Okay, great. Look, I mean, it's you
Sorry.
always make me feel better, because I feel like I'm terribly incompetent with technology, but it's always nice to see that there are people who are much more hopeless than
Yeah,
I
I'm hopeless. I'm on the fucking. My setup right now is very hopeless. Like uh, my headphones are plugged into my phone,
am.
and then but then I'm watching on the iPad because the screen's slightly larger than the
Yeah,
phone. So, but there's like a 5 second delay on the iPad.
there needs to be a delay. I think that's kind of a built-in function of using a streaming setup, so you can actually you have, like, if something really happens that you can't foresee, you have some room to just cut it off, so it
Yeah.
doesn't even make it to the broadcast. But yeah, have you been looking at this? I know I sent you the link earlier, but is there a
Uh,
watch that you want to start with, so we talk about
um,
it, or any of the pieces that
oh
I
man,
discussed so far?
Well, I love the fact that last absolute unit, Roger Dubuis. I love the fact that on the dial it had spelled out sports activity watch.
Yes,
That to
sir.
me was like that was a that was a detail that I think is really incredible. I mean, I've seen a couple of the presentations and reviews that you've done of this series, but I haven't actually really
Mm.
aside from when you've discussed it. I on my own time I haven't really looked into it, so I don't wanna comment too much aside from the fact that the not square, not quite round
Yeah.
aspect of the case design to me is really fascinating. The evacuated profiles on the case back, which
Yes.
I don't know if those are cast in there or that's like an engraving that they then blast. That to me is really fascinating.
Mhm.
Just texturally, I think it's really interesting. Um, yeah, this I really need to do a deeper dive into this watchmaker. You
Absolutely.
know, like
I was gonna say maybe, just to people who don't quite know much about Roger Dubuis as a brand, especially about the early years, um, which is not to necessarily speak ill of what is going on right now at Roger Dubuis. They have, though, distinctly focused on what they call the hyper horological aspect of the brand, which has taken the name so far off where Roger Dubuis left it. Um, the easy diver slash sports activity part is probably where he went most wild in his own era when he was properly in charge of his own brand. Nowadays, it's more of Richard Mille kind of flavor, a lot of open worked, exoskeleton inspired designs that are incredibly futuristic and a little bit over the top for my taste. Um, the At the outset, Roger Dubuis had um, a partner in this business who had in the past designed watches for Frank Müller as well. Um, so they had some square and Art Deco shaped watches too, in addition to this Easy Diver sports activity line. Um, Yet most of the highly desirable, more collectible um, early Roger Dubuis is usually the classic cases for the chronographs, the Sympathy cases for the time only chronometers, which uh, is basically a dressier version of uh, dressier and much smaller version of this case. Let me show a few examples of those cases. So this is, and the great thing about it is not only the design um, element, but again the whole um,
I mean,
investment in being a Genevan watchmaker. With um, a lot of the watches coming not only with the hallmark of Geneva, but chronometric assessments from the Neuchâtel Observatory. So the highest standards you would expect from high horology, from the echelons of high horology, connected with also at times very interesting designs, such as the Sympathy case. And we talked about this for sure with you, St. Peter, the way in the early examples like this, for instance, where even the crystal and the dial itself is cut to that distinct shape.
It's incredible. I mean, I still think those are surprisingly undervalued. And I think part of that has to do with the contemporary market and the direction that the brand has gone in. Like this seems like the type of thing that they could revive. If it was a company that was doing, like a historiques type thing that like VC does, for example. I think there would be like a pretty decent chunk of collectors out there that would kind of pursue that, you
Mm.
know, that case shape. But I don't know. That's my own speculation. But there's some
Yeah.
really nice quality. Like these two register chronos are also really really beautiful. And I think the way that they configure the perpetual calendars
Oh
on
yeah.
this dial layout is actually very successful.
Right, with the bi-retrograde, basically. Right.
Hmm.
That's a great configuration that I really like. I mean, I can only respond in a very hasty way, but I think the reason that Roger Dubuis went in that different, markedly different direction is, I think, is really a result of this sort of luxury conglomerate ownership, right? And in general that I have more of a positive assessment of Richemont as opposed to, say, the Swatch Group, for example, even though I do criticize them every so often for very specific things. But, when you have such a top-heavy roster in terms of your watchmakers, we're talking about Vacheron Constantin, we're talking about Alain Gonzone, we're talking about Gégé Lecoutre, we're also talking about Cartier. Uh, there's not much room for Roger Dubuis to do what it does in terms of classical design, in terms of Geneva, uh, hallmark watchmaking. It's kind of biting into the space of all these different brands. So it has to go in a completely different direction altogether if it is to exist within that ecosystem. Like you said, it has to somehow, for whatever reason, face the fate of, let's say, Gérard Perregaux or Ulysse Nardin within Keurig, where they had to devolve and separate themselves and reorganize under a new leadership. That would be the only way where something like that would make a comeback in a proper sense into the lineup.
Yeah, and when you spell it out that clearly with regards to those other these are kind of in terms of like classic watchmaking, behemoths of like the non-independents now. The groups that have ultimately been bought by others, but they're really, in my opinion, some of the best ones out there. You know, for this kind of like true, post wristwatch era. Like we're talking about timepieces that are intentionally designed and decorated to be worn on the
Mm.
wrist. Like this group. Right. I mean, it's like BC, BC Cartier, Lange, and JLC. I mean, how many more would you want? Would you want to have crammed in there? Talking about talking about classic wrist pieces. So that kind of makes sense. I mean, I don't know if I would ever gravitate towards the more contemporary Dubuis catalog.
Mhm.
It's hard to say because I feel like they make, and I don't necessarily want to go down that kind of rabbit hole because I think the collection, the Elton John collection, there's a lot in there to talk about, that I'm kind of excited about talking about. But that that is a bigger conversation about the kind of strategic aesthetic decisions that they made that, it almost seems like the brand is marketing themselves to like someone who's gonna buy, someone who drives a supercar, and like they want the carbon, like I need the high tech carbon thing, with the flying tourbillon to like go along with my Lamborghini. Um, and I think they've done several collaborations, right, with that brand also. Like did Dubuis, who did the Countach? Wasn't there a Countach watch that came out with the recent Lamborghini relaunch?
I think so. It's like a version of the Excalibur Spider or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right here. Yeah, I mean, this is actually great in terms of just a quick visual contrast, right? Like depending, what are we looking at here compared to what we were looking at now? Again, not to necessarily put this down at all, but this, we were looking at kind of a cross between Patek and Cartier just a second ago, and this is more, Gros Belforce slash Richard Mille with a little bit of flavor of its own.
Hmm.
I mean, still, I would say still better than a Code 1159 in the sense it's an original design at least. But beyond that, I wouldn't have much of anything good to say.
Yeah, I need to get to a place, like I feel like in my own appreciation of this hobby, and I do believe this is a bigger conversation just in general that we could relate to different aspects of the hobby, in general, but e- all of the technical advancement and the orological craftsmanship and the engineering that's in that piece, like I feel like there needs to be a part of me that, can appreciate that on its own and not be hung up on the design. Because as a designer, or looking at it, I just think it's ugly. I don't know what to say. This older one, I could see how someone would look at this and think it's ugly, but I think it's less contrived than the Countach. Like I think it's got a kind of quirky honesty about it, um, that, I think is lacking in the current collection.
And I also I appreciate what Captain Kirk is saying here, even though again, I don't necessarily like the direction they have taken, and I'm sticking to my guns in terms of why I think is the reason. Obviously, ex post facto, they can explain it like this. Wasn't Dubuis always kind of an edgy designer? Maybe they are staying true to that impulse. I think after the fact, you can explain it away like that, and it's a good narrative. But I really think that the main reason is that if Dubuis was left to survive as Dubuis left it, as the late Roger Dubuis left it, it would just eat too much into what Vacheron Constantin does, what Cartier and Lange do in their own ways, um, and even to a certain extent what Jaeger-LeCoultre does, even though it's not exactly the same designs, but there were a lot of rectangular watches and Art Deco designed watches in Roger Dubuis' catalog as well. And yes, it is something that carries the hallmark of Geneva, but again, I think the movement finishing at of the early Roger Dubuis pieces were compared to today's Jaeger-LeCoultre, I think, on a higher level, so on and so forth. I mean, I don't want to beat the dead horse. And St. Peter, I appreciate that you're here, and I know you're here to talk about Sir Elton John's watch collection, which is going on sale as part of the Goodbye Peachtree. This is a February event by Christie's that includes all the different pieces that Elton John is basically moving after he sold his Atlanta condo and moved from Atlanta. What should we take a stab at next, St. Peter?
Oh man, that's a tough question. Well, for starters, I'd like to thank you for sharing this with me. I think I may have seen something pop up about it, but when you sent me the link and I just dug in, I immediately was like, wow, what a fascinating collection from the standpoint of, someone that, all right, so there's a theme, like the bedazzled, or I always think of, or wait, I think you said, did you say Bejeweled before? I can't
Yeah.
remember which. So yeah, but when you said Bejeweled, I could, do you know the Bedazzler? Do you remember that product? That
Yes, there was Bedazzler, and there was also a particular application of it that was a trend at some point, like the jazzling or something. How do they pronounce it?
I can't remember. I just remember that. I
That
remember
was a
that
nice
commercial.
that was a nice aesthetic. I like following breadcrumbs like that. So it's I like that. I want that
I,
trend to be back.
yeah, I mean, it just it was so fun. You could add jewels to whatever you want. But in this sense, like they're real. Like all these pieces are very high end from some of the highest houses
Yeah.
and really exquisite combinations. I mean, it's hard for me to pick one, but I'll just pick because it's one of the ones I just saw, which is the Royal Oak.
You have to
And it
start
looks
somewhere,
like,
right?
yeah, it looks like it had like
Right
the
here.
yeah, the MOP dial with
Yes, sir.
is it, so does that have is it sapphires on the bezel?
Yes, I think it's in fact baguette cut sapphires on the octagonal bezel.
And this is so fascinating. So it's I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't read the description. It's a white gold? Is the case precious metal or?
Yes. So let's go through the details. They haven't. I don't think they mentioned the reference number here, but it looks like 56175 to me. 56175, 33 millimeters in white gold, case and integrated bracelet and all. And like you said, it has a blue tinted, like a very faintly powder blue tinted mother of pearl dial, sapphires at the quarters, brilliant diamonds for the rest of the markers, and also, again, baguette cut sapphires on the octagonal bezel as well.
And very uniquely, what appears to be yellow gold screws in the bezel, right?
No, I think that's just the way white gold screws usually age. So they take on that
Whoa,
yellowish patina usually because
that's
this
fascinating.
the
They look
screws.
they look really yellow in that photograph.
Yeah. So when I was reading up a lot on the Royal Oak history for the 50th anniversary, and I made a couple of videos, you might remember, when they were at the prototyping stage, obviously everything was supposed to be stainless steel, right? And they made a few prototypes in white gold. When they started the stainless steel, and literally left it in salt water at Le Brassus when they were testing it out, the stainless steel screws were apparently not so stainless after all, so they started getting rusty, etc. And the solution they found was to use white gold bolts. And you will see with a lot of vintage and neo-vintage Royal Oaks, if those bolts have not been screwed up and changed up, they would have taken on this yellowish tint, because not all white gold is equal, right? Not all white gold is plated in the way that it doesn't fade or tarnish or take on patina. This one does, so it gets closer to a yellower shade over time.
It's fascinating.
David, thank you so much. $2.99 in Australian. YB, honest opinion on IWC Mark 20 black on steel. David, can I be honest with him, St. Peter?
Well, you have to be honest.
Gotta be honest with you. You know, I have all sorts of allergies to IWC as a brand, but if there is one or two watches that I like, the Mark 20 is one of them. I like it so much more than most certainly the big Pilot style watches. Mark 20 to me is so much more wearable on an everyday basis. I like the aesthetic. It's very simple, yet it also contains all the necessary hallmarks of the pilot's watch / field watch DNA. You know, it's like a lot of people find that aesthetic at a lower price point, perhaps with Zinn, with Stova, with also, of course, to a certain extent, Hamilton, even though that's more field watch than Pilot. But again, you know, the concept remains the same, right? A watch that has a highly legible dial that is accentuated by the fact that it's a black background, oversized numerals, and here also generously luminous hands. I actually love the Mark 20. I don't know, what do you think, St. Peter? Is that a watch you would rock?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I feel like this for me, when I picked up the Eins, it like the aesthetic that is in a lot of the IWC Pilot pieces, to me, if I had more money to spend at the time, I may have gravitated towards something like this, because in terms of the case shape and the just the overall dial design, the layout, the shape of the hands, and the aesthetic, it kind of makes sense. But you obviously the direction that my kind of taste and collection has moved in, and I couldn't really imagine getting into IWC for me personally until I get to a place where I feel like I've explored the path that I'm currently on enough where it's like, okay, I kind of want to go back in that direction. Um, I mean, I actually really like what IWC does with the Ceratanium,
Yes.
that proprietary alloy that they made, which is like a combination of ceramic and titanium, and it's stronger than ceramic, but it's not quite titanium. That to me is incredibly fascinating. I like a lot of what they do. My biggest critique of IWC now currently is that I think they're I think it would be nice if they could scale everything down. So it'd be nice if they could make something that was like a little bit slimmer, smaller in diameter, and in general, I think these pieces for where they are with their price point. They should have higher water resistance, and I know there's a
God.
lot of,
Oh my
I
God.
know,
The whole whining about water resistance and power reserve that's like my biggest pet peeves of all time. Um,
but,
but
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 if I get it, but if you're
but
spending, so
the
do you think,
what does what you spend on a watch have to do with water resistance? Just get a nice Seiko that has 200 meters and you're set. It has nothing to do with with money or with the value of a watch. But the important thing you said there that I completely agree with, that they could, for the most part, right? Not from Mark 20. I think Mark 20 is perfectly sized and proportioned, actually. But from most of the rest of their line, even the so-called Pilot's 41, right, which is actually a 42 millimeter watch, they could do with smaller and slimmer. But for that, they would actually have to have real in-house movements, right? They have to stop using uh, the Valjoux 7750 architecture, and they won't, because they don't want to invest that money. They want to ride on that sweet, bottom line. So you're absolutely right, but that's again something that's a result of huge group ownership, right? You have just such a little, you know, wiggle room when it comes to those things. Um, just before we move on to something else, the bolts obviously on a Royal Oak bezel have to be perfectly aligned, as Kino Pravda was saying in the chats. That they are not doesn't necessarily mean there's something shady or fake behind it. It just means that the watch probably hasn't seen proper service. And by that, I don't simply mean that it always has to go to the maker, although that's preferable to some. But you don't just trust Royal Oak to just any watchmaker, right? Yeah, I mean, they have to know what they are dealing with. And if they don't know enough to align the bolts properly, they they can probably screw a whole bunch of different things as well. But I mean,
yeah.
again, this is just a quartz movement. I'm sure it's fine otherwise. But anyway,
I mean, it does seem insane that someone that someone put those things in crooked. Hey, it is what it is.
yeah. Again, someone who just doesn't know any better, I guess, right? But yeah, this is, I mean, visually speaking, a stunning watch. And the 33 millimeter, having, worn and tried it out on so many different occasions, especially in precious metal, has a very solid feel on the wrist. Of course, it is a smaller watch, right? People have different ways of understanding this. I do think, by and large, as a rule of thumb, it's okay to say that integrated bracelet watches wear a little larger than what the numbers on paper might indicate. But of course, that has a lot to do with design, with the specific design, with the contours of your wrist and everything else. But I think if you are more or less confident with smaller sized watches, 33 in Royal Oaks is actually something, it's like an interesting range that you can look at, especially because there's so many variations that you can bump into something like this. And if you fall in love with it, don't let the 33 millimeter hold you back, especially if you have a chance to try it on before you can buy. This is lot 400 with a pre-auction estimate of 10 to 15,000 in US dollars. And I believe it's reference 56175.
I feel like if you could own a precious metal mother of pearl dial gem set Royal Oak, even if it's 33 millimeters, but it was previously owned by Elton John for under $20,000. I mean, whew, that's a that's a special piece to get.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, that because as you know, I'm a little bit confused because there are like 6 different sales, and some are online only, some are going to have live events. So in each instance, it really depends on who is in the room, who is aware, who is necessarily going after these. And even with wide exposure, among us watch geeks, a lot of us, and I'm talking in the collective without necessarily including myself wholly in it, but a lot of us have even an allergy to baguette diamonds as our markers, right? So there's a good chance that the selection already alienates and filters out a good part of heteronormative, let's put it this way, watch geeks. So it's an interesting auction for that reason, because on the one hand, it's the auctioneer's dream, right? To have a crossover event like this to sell watches. Wow, what a great opportunity, right? It feels like you can break all sorts of records. But then a lot of the watches are really an acquired taste for mainstream taste in wristwatches.
I mean, I feel like this piece is potentially just riding what seems to be like a trend that I've observed, and I don't know if it's the algorithm or the people who I've chosen to follow on social media, but it's this, vintage, neo-vintage, smaller quartz, precious metal, like I'm seeing this like Cellini, Piaget, stone dial, slim. It doesn't matter if it's mechanical or quartz. These more jewelry pieces, like the type of piece you could imagine, being on the set of Casino. I feel like that's very, very in vogue right now. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that particular piece exceed the estimate. But that's what this entire collection is, except for the larger size pieces,
Yeah.
right? Like everything in here is riding that wave, it's really incredible to just imagine that this individual who was so influential in
Yeah.
terms of popular culture, and art and music to be tapping into what are now these icons. But what I've seen is some of these pieces that are in this collection now, I think, have become icons just in the past 2 or 3 years. 3 or 4 years
That's
ago,
true. And
not many people.
we're gonna talk about at least some of them, I'm sure, because there's some Cartier pieces that I'm sure have piqued your interest or fancy. But I do wanna, before we jump back again, St. Peter, I wanna
Hmm.
address something Nate Dogg said in the super chat. Nate Dogg is also a member of the channel, so thank you so much for your support, Nate Dogg. $4.99 in US dollars. Why do Kurt Klaus perpetuals not get the respect they deserve? I own a JLC Master Grand Memo Vox, a 146295 in rose gold, and an IW 502129 amazing watches. Nate Dogg, there are 2 reasons. One, sheer ignorance. I think most people don't even know what a Kurt Klaus perpetual calendar is. Again, my audience probably does. Kurt Klaus was in basically IWC's golden age under Günther Blümlein. He was the technical director of IWC. He was at the head of the movement workshop. And the story goes that one morning when he was walking his dog, he came up with this majestic and simplified solution for a perpetual calendar module that could be installed on what is one of the most generic and workhorse chronograph movements of all time that we were just talking about, the ETA Valjoux 7750. And it was not only that sort of handy module that made it cheap to produce, easier to service, but also it was the kind of module, and that's Kurt Klaus's genius multiplied, that was synchronically adjusted on the crown, or in certain adaptations just with an extra pusher, single pusher. Everything moves in synchrony, so there's no way of coming up with random and nonsensical permutations of dates and moon phases. It's really a miraculous thing when you think about it, and that's there are a few reasons again why it's no longer appreciated. One, I think once again people don't know much about the history and about the technical ingenuity that went into it. Most people would perhaps not know when the IWC Da Vinci perpetual calendar was introduced in 1986, I want to say. I think it was 1986. No, 1985, sorry. When it was introduced in 1985, did you know, for example, St. Peter, that it was only the second perpetual calendar chronograph produced in series after Patek's 1518?
I didn't know that, but that's something that I will take note of.
That's what Kurt Klaus, made possible with that simple solution of module. Now, the second reason, because there are people who know as much as I do, not many, but they are out there, who don't necessarily respect it in the same way, because modules and outsourcing of movements has gotten a bad rep over time, especially since Rolex's marketing, being pumped and disseminated everywhere about vertical integration, about everything being made in-house and whatever else. So people now basically cheapen the idea, look down upon and frown upon the idea that you could use when it allows you to do exceptional things, outsourced and relatively simple movement structures and architectures, and do something special with them. People prefer a much more inferior, sometimes, movements just because it is served up to them as everything in-house from our vertical manufacture, on the top of the peak of this mountain in a castle and whatever. So that's my rant. I'm sorry about it, but that's why Kurt Klaus doesn't get the respect he deserves by and large. Yeah, what do you think we should go next? One of the Cartiers, maybe.
Yeah,
or...
I mean, so the Gemset Tortue, I think is kind of interesting. I mean, also he's got the two chronos. So the other one's the is it American? Yeah, that one. Yeah,
I think the American is that's a quartz movement, right? This.
Oh, it was. Sorry, I didn't look at that closely enough. Oh yeah, it does. It is quartz.
That's okay. Not to say I don't want to discuss it for that reason, but when you juxtaposed it with the Tortue, I'm like, let's talk about the
right
mono pusher. But yeah, we can start with either one.
Yeah, so this piece, obviously, the Americane's near and dear to me. It was the first Cartier piece I decided to acquire. I like the K shape. Um, how it's evocative of the Suntre. Going back to the original Suntre design from, I believe it was 1921.
Mm.
They're very rare on bracelets. They're typically strap pieces, and they're even more rare with full pave treatment. I didn't realize that they had a quartz version of the chronograph. I thought the chronos were mechanical movements, but to be honest, I never really looked into to um, the chronographs because I feel like the like the tank for me, it's always been the kind of piece that it should just be time only without a date. That's
Mm.
my taste, or possibly a dual time if they could, if they could make it elegant. The double movement dual time
Oh yeah, yeah.
centres, for example, I think are really cool with the two crowns. Um, so yeah, it's like I think this piece, I wonder, like with so many of these pieces in his collection, I wonder, did he order these things, or does he go into these boutiques and because it's Elton John and he introduces himself to the brand and they kind of know his style and they know his taste, they know they know he's Rocket Man, right? Like, does he come in there and they're like, we've got just the piece for you. We keep it in the safe, or they keep it, in the case with all the spotlights on it, but it's behind glass, or does he say, all right, I really like this one, but like it's got to be covered with diamonds,
Honestly,
like
I don't. I can't speak to his personal relationship with these brands, but a person of that stature usually, when it comes to brands like Cartier, they may even reach out to him. But in the case of Elton John, I'm pretty sure that he's like a long-standing customer of Cartier. There's like among UK's political, social, and cultural elites, there is a very, I would say, rightful also obsession with Cartier for that goes all the way back, at least to the Windsors. The I mean the Duke and Duchess. Who used to like order bespoke pieces for Wallace, from Cartier's Paris boutique, etc. So um, I'm sure in this case, some of these pieces may even be special order, um, though. Yeah, I'm also sure that Jamset Cartier is not necessarily a rare bird either. I mean, there are a lot of pieces they render in these sorts of extravagant ways, and not necessarily with a special order, perhaps with a special client in mind, but not with a specific order either. But it could have gone either way, like you said. They may have approached him because he is a long-standing customer, and offering him things that could appeal to his taste, specifically. Could have gone either way.
yeah. So this piece in the collection, when I look at his collection as a whole, it tells me that I think he's interested in having a lot of different shape pieces, right? So the trend with the theme that we've seen with precious metal and gems, that's throughout, and that kind of makes sense considering the aesthetic. But I think what also makes sense when you think about that is that there are a lot of different pieces in the collection that have different shapes and will sit on the wrist differently and potentially complement one outfit in one way more than another outfit in another way. And I think someone who's has such a kind of like exuberant fashion sense also. Like it would make sense, right, that they have this collection of all these different shape watches to kind of mix and match and with whatever outfit it is that they choose. So the pedigree, the brand, the design, all that stuff to me is fascinating about this lot. Obviously I haven't warmed up to quartz yet, but I think being such a Cartier fanboy, eventually I'll be there. For all we know, my first Tank Louis, maybe I'll go for a quartz one. I don't know. Um, but yeah, it's my only critique. I mean, this like I don't think I would ever get something that's like a full bust down like this, but these bracelets, and I think one of the images that you showed before of the backside, you could kind of see they're hollow in a way that on the outside uh, it wouldn't suggest that they were. Like they appear heavier from the front than they do from the back. And I always thought that was kind of like what is that? Why does it look hollow like on the backside?
You
Like
know, I also have to say, even though again, this piece, and I was showing one of the outfits, one of the stage costumes that are part of the same auction, right? Part of the same collection, so to speak, that is going up for sale. So it makes absolute sense when you put it that way, right? Because you are not going to wear this and wear, with a Rolex professional model, right? You need to dial it up a few notches at the very least in terms of the wristwatch that you're wearing with an outfit like this. Um, and when I mean, you said it first when we looked at this, that um, a lot of times you are used to seeing many of Cartier's pieces on a leather strap, and you might say that's simply tradition, maybe kind of a blind devotion to tradition on our part, and whatever. But I honestly think, in most instances, these designs just look better on a leather strap, because to me, a leather strap is more of a um, relief in a way, or like a backdrop for the design to shine on when it's mounted on it. Because when you pair it with a bracelet, whether we are talking about the Pasha or the Tank, I feel it takes away something from the distinct contours of that design. It flows into the bracelet, and a lot of times I understand that's desirable from an ergonomic standpoint, from the standpoint perhaps of other people's tastes. To me, it always seems to take something away from the distinction of the case design when it comes to a Tank Centré, when it comes to a Pasha, and even the Santos, that people have gotten used to thinking of it as almost like an integrated bracelet sports watch in our era. I still like Santos Dumont a little more because it's usually precious metal and usually matched with a leather strap. But that's just me. And yeah, when it comes to quartz movements, I mean, I don't necessarily have religious sentiment against them. I mean, obviously, this is much less interesting to me when you juxtapose it with a single button chronograph movement designed by François Porjon and Denis Flageolet. But it is what it is. Sometimes you want a design like this to be as slim as possible, to give it the right contours, and it's Not that it's impossible to do that with a mechanical movement, but it's certainly much more costly. And brands like Cartier don't always go that way. So this is lot 396, Cartier Tank Américain chronograph in white gold on a bracelet, decked all over the place with diamonds on the case and the bracelet, a reference 2339, with a pre-auction estimates set within the range between 10,000 to 15,000 in US dollars. Two registers at 4 o'clock for a 30-minute totalizer, at 12 o'clock, at 8 o'clock, 12-hour counter, and there's an oversized subdial at 12 for a pointer dates. One of the things that I really like about these sorts of diamond set watches by Cartier is also the fact that you would have a multifaceted diamond to top off the crown, rather than, say, a sapphire cabochon or something similar. We have a silvered guilloche dial, heat blued hands. So everything else aesthetically is, of course, signature Cartier. Speaking of chronographs, next up we can go to the Tortue Monopoussoir, the monopusher Tortue chronograph by Cartier from that famous CP series. Are you still there, St. Peter? Maybe St. Peter is away momentarily. CP stands for Collection Privée Cartier Paris. This was a decade of very interesting work by Cartier, usually in the manner of limited editions between 1998 and 2008, bringing together some of the most emblematic designs from Cartier's archive with their own in-house expertise, as well as the expertise of emergent high horological makers. So a lot of times you would have watches that were essentially collaborations between Cartier and some of the independents we know today. There is famous Jour et Nuit watch, day and night watch, for example, that is essentially Cartier times Anderson. And probably the one that people talk about most in this manner is the watch you're looking at right now. The Tortue is originally a Louis Cartier design from the Roaring 20s. Tortue à pattes, because of the distinctive shape of the case. It's called a turtle on its legs, or turtle on legs. Otherwise, of course, it is also kind of a barrel-shaped case, which the French also call tonneau, but it's a little bit different than that. And one of the most popular iterations of the Tortue, already in the 20s, was the single button chronograph. And at the time, François-Paul Jean was already collaborating with Cartier and was part of this collective, basically, Technique horlogère appliquée, a movement workshop that he led with Denis Flageolet, whom we know through his work in De Béthune these days. Vianney Alter was part of that workshop as well, though to my knowledge, he was not actually involved in the development of this movement. It was François-Paul Jean and Denis Flageolet who, in fact, went to Cartier with the idea, with the proposal to resurrect this monopusher chronograph in the Tortue case. And they designed the movement 045 MC, beautiful column wheel hand-wound chronograph movement that is operated with a single button, which is part of the crown, by the way. So there's no extra button, which I think works really well with the case shape as well, right? Again, it's another way to keep that focus on the aesthetic of the watch without interrupting it in some other way. And of course, in Cartier's distinctive fashion, those bridge plates are emblazoned with their double wishbone logo. Beautiful watch. We have a white gold case in this instance that is once again gem sets with diamonds. With again a multifaceted diamond set on the octagonal crown. A silvered guilloche dial. Elongated Roman numerals with the secret Cartier signature at 7 o'clock. Heat blued hands, including all the chronograph hands, and the hands for the hour and minutes are actually styled after Breguet. It's a very beautiful piece. It's a very elegant piece. And in this case, it's also an even more rare configuration of an already quite desirable chronograph. This is one of the Cartier pieces that have gained exponentially in value in the last few years, as St. Peter mentioned it earlier. Very elegant, very wearable, very distinctive. And even though it's not outwardly signed, right? People love these sorts of double signed watches and everything, as you know, increasingly so. It is a timepiece that at once carries the signature of one of the most recognizable brands, the jeweler of kings, the king of jewelers, as they say for Cartier, and with a movement that also bears the names of some of the emergent independent watchmakers at the time, names that we today know and respect as being, really on the vanguard of independent watchmaking, such as François Paul and Denis Flageolet. The dimensions of the Tortue case is kind of wears like 38 millimeters, you might say, 34 by 43 millimeters, lug to lug. So it has actually quite a presence on the wrist without being overbearing. And since it's a hand-wound chronograph and a very sleek dress watch, the thickness is also right around 10 millimeters. So it's an incredibly classy piece, and it lists here as lot 398 with a pre-auction estimate between 15,000 to 25,000 in US dollars. St. Peter, you did fall off. $4.99. Tech fail, but thanks for letting me join. Love how over the top this collection is. Thank you so much for joining, St. Peter. It was lovely to have you on here. By the way, as I click through the watches, we can see how I mentioned the whole collection is divided into 6 landmark sales. Like this one is, for example, part of the day sale, as they called it, right? Whereas the earlier chronograph that we were looking at, the Tank Américain, was of the day sale. The Roger Dubuis, I think, was part of the jewel box or whatever they called it. Right. This was, for example, the collection of Sir Elton John, the jewel box. So, in fact, I reached these listings, and I will post the link again in the chat if you want to highlight any particular lots. So I sent it there, but I reached it by only ticking the watches category. But in fact, the 30 watches are not sold as part of a separate collection by Christie's. They are actually dispersed between the different sales that they have over the whole event. This is the one that I wanted to look at actually before St. Peter went. This is a very fascinating Vacheron Constantin rectangular dress watch. It's a piece that's called Jalousie in French. You can, of course, simply translate jalousie as blinds. Right, in the technical sense. But of course, it literally means jealousy as well, right? As if the whole contraption was something designed to help you guard what you are hiding behind it jealously. And this is a very extravagant and and in a way, flippant piece almost, even in its most streamlined form, when it's not gem set like this, because essentially it is literally worn as a piece of jewelry on the wrist when you have this button that allows it to reveal through the blinds the dial of the watch when you can read the time. So essentially, it is a time-only watch, 2 hands with the seconds on the subdial, but you can only take a peek when you actually want to reveal. It's a very interesting piece indeed, with gem setting as well as engraving on the flanks of the case. And you can see the case back has this sort of concave shape, which allows it to sit nicely on the wrist as well. This is the reference 91,002 from the Les Historiques series, Vacheron Constantin's famous line where they bring back and to a certain extent reinterpret some of the most distinguished designs from their own archive. Of course, that is particularly important for Vacheron Constantin because they are a historical house. In fact, the longest continuously operating watch manufacturer in the entire world. So for them to dip into that history and exhibit it in this particular way is a matter of pride, you might say. So for some, that line is where their best work is, and I would include myself in that group. I've always been a big fan of the Corne de Vache and other chronographs that they build on the base of the Lemania CH27 within that line. Over time, I came to love more and more the American 1921, the cushion-shaped driver's watch with that offset dial, the slanted dial, that I also like quite a bit. And over time, of course, models come in and go, cycle in and out of the Les Historiques or Historique line, and Jalousie, the watch with the French blinds or shutter dial, was one of these. This is a gem set version of it in 18 karat white gold. It is lot number 397 from the Elton John collection, and has a pre-auction estimate set at 10,000 to 15,000 in US dollars. let's go for something that's a little more perhaps middle of the road, but no less horologically interesting. Because we remember Frank Müller from his perhaps quirkier designs, from the way that he injected new life to tonneau-shaped cases, which were a throwback to the Roaring '20s and to the Art Deco era. But he was also someone who, at least at the initiation of his independent brands, presented himself as a master of complications. So he had many interesting watches that wanted to live up to that name. And this reference 7,000 Coupe E, Coupe, of course, standing for Quinzième Perpétuel, perpetual calendar. This is a perpetual calendar chronograph with a retrograde indicator for the month. There's also a leap year indication, as you can see, located in a small additional subdial at 8 o'clock, and a moon phase indicator that kind of takes the focal point of the watch at 12 o'clock. I always like that. I always somehow prefer that. There's also an overlapping, again, small subdial at 3 o'clock for a 24-hour day-night indication. Pointer date at 9 o'clock, days of the week at 3, and at the lower half of the dial, at around 6 o'clock, there's a fan-like scale, which is, in fact, for the month, indicated with a retrograde hand. As you can see, there's significant oxidization on the left side of the case. Domed bezel on an officer-styled case with screw-through screw bars, so to speak. This is a piece from the 90s in 18 karat pink gold, 39 millimeters in diameter, matched with a pink gold buckle. A perpetual calendar chronograph from Frank Müller, master of complications, pink gold with a black dial. I think a very stunning watch with some red accents, a beautiful placement of the moon phase indicator, Breguet hands, combining also the perpetual calendar and the chronograph with a retrograde indication for the month. overall, again, one of the more interesting, more unpredictable and surprising pieces from the Sir Elton John watch collection that has otherwise a kind of theme or thread running through it, which is jewelry like gem sets, dressy watches from recognizable jewelry houses like Cartier, like Chopard. But once every so often, you run into a piece that is from Alain Gonzone, as we looked at, that is from Frank Müller, that's from Roger Dubuis. This is from Frank Müller, Perpetual Calendar Chronograph, lot number 907, with a pre-auction estimate set in the range between 10,000 to 15,000 in US dollars. There's a Frank Müller chronograph from around the same period of time. That's perhaps more in line in terms of the aesthetic with the other watches we have been looking at. .39 millimeters in diameter in white gold. This, by the way, is the chronograph that Waco kind of resurrected or reissued as part of his Grail Watch scheme earlier last year, if I'm not mistaken. So it's powered by the Lemania 1874 movement, which is the base of Omega 861. Of course, assembled and finished in a distinctive way, not really extravagant or astonishing in some fashion, but a little bit different than Omega's rendition. Exhibition caseback, beautiful gem setting again that frames even that exhibition caseback. Inscribed number 4 in the series here. Again, that's officer-styled case, or rather with the officer lugs, screw-through spring bars. Rows of diamonds on the flanks of the case too. And baguette cuts, sapphires for the hour markers, heat blued hands, and a diamond pavé dial. This is lot number 401 for a Frank Müller chronograph from the 90s as part of a limited run, inscribed number 4 on the back, in a 39mm white gold case with officer lugs. The entire case gem set with diamonds, with a diamond pavé dial and sapphire hour markers. Frank Müller reference 2865 with a pre-auction estimate between 8,000 to 12,000 in US dollars. We have about an hour, but I would appreciate it if you could hit the like button if you haven't done so already. If you are somehow chancing upon this broadcast, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. I am always here practically on a daily basis with watch-related content, always solidly focused on providing watch content only for the passion for a knowledge of wristwatches and nothing else. So if you want to support the channel, subscribe, spread the word, send the link around to other enthusiasts and collectors. It's always great to expand this community that we are building here. Of course, you can always support the channel with super chats, super stickers. It really keeps the lights on for a channel that's self-sustaining and that works only for its community and at the behest of its audience. It's all well appreciated, and there are also links included in the video description that you can use to contribute further. Speaking of watches that perhaps both fit the mold, but also upset the expectations a little bit, here's a Jaeger-LeCoultre triple calendar with in platinum with bezel set with baguette diamonds. This is a Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Control triple calendar, reference 140687. Incidentally, it's inscribed on the back as number 002. So part, again, of a special series, a limited series. Small seconds at 6, Arabic numerals at the quarters, dagger-shaped, multifaceted, applied markers for the rest of the hours. The date is indicated along the perimeter of the dial with a centrally deployed hand that has a crescent-shaped tip. There are 2 further apertures or wickets at 12 o'clock under the signature of the maker for the day of the week and the month. There are 2 further correctors on the flank of the case. For this Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Control triple calendar in platinum, 37 millimeters in diameter, with a bezel gem set with diamonds, as we like it on this channel. The platinum case is apparently matched with a platinum déployant clasp from JLC, even though that is not pictured here. Self-winding movements, lot 399 with a pre-auction estimate set in the range between 12,000 to 18,000 in US dollars. America's Army 285. Hey man, how are you? I'm sure you are around, but I haven't seen your name for a while in the chat and in the comments, so it's nice to see it again. But yes, let's push us forward in the algorithm by hitting the like button, by subscribing, by sharing the link. It's all well appreciated. Ooh, what's going on? Things are slowing down. Okay. We're looking at the watches from the Sir Elton John collection, going up for auction in February, between 9 to 28, in fact. There's also an exhibition connected to this at Christie's, New York, Rockefeller Center, from February 9th to the 21st. Speaking of dual time Cartier tank, here is one that is powered by a quartz movement. This is the tank Divin, which is a version of the tank that's rectangular and horizontal. It takes advantage of that space by having two separate dials. I gotta say, I really like it when they do this using different numerals, different characters, kind of different aesthetic for the two separate dials. Here, there's not much that distinguishes to the two dials. They have both Roman numerals. Only one has the Cartier signature. And obviously, most of us know our right from left. So I'm not really saying that, there needs to be such a strict distinction. But aesthetically, I think it helps the matter a little more. And it might actually help visually too, that distinction, if you are trying to check the time at a quick glance or two. But that's just my personal opinion. Once again, we have a watch that's powered by a quartz movement, a dual time tank in the less usual divan design. It's kind of a horizontal rectangle. with two separate dials that can be set separately. And once again, a white gold case that is set with diamonds. On the bezel and the lugs. Some of these watches, as you can see, are barely worn, but overall, they're all extremely well preserved, seemingly. Barring for that distinct oxidization of the Frank Muller perpetual calendar on the case, it's hard to find any real fault with the condition of these watches, at least at first blush. And some of them look genuinely unworn, right? So between that oxidization and the misalignment of the bolts on that Royal Oak's octagonal bezel, nothing jumps out at us at first look. This Cartier Tank Divan reference 2756 in 18-karat white gold, dual time watch, diamond set on the bezel and the lugs, powered by a quartz movement. Lot 913 has a pre-auction estimates between 12,000 to 18,000 in US dollars. Gone Dog, nice to see you, man. Great to catch you too. And thank you. I'm glad people learn something. You know, it's a lot of times, you know, even when I don't know, I learn something while I'm researching for these things. I learn something sometimes on the fly when someone asks a question that I'm not, ready to answer just like that. It's always a lot of fun for me, very informative and entertaining for me. So when someone else shares that sentiment, it makes me even happier. Cartier, as you guys know, is a theme here. So we have the Santos in the octagonal shape. Really stunning watch in platinum. The Santos octagons are usually rather small. I'm sure some of us can make it work. I'm sure it could still be a very interesting watch, but that's something to be kept in mind. Unlike the Royal Oak, the screws here are usually not aligned, which is not a problem for me. They were not meant to be that way. You guys know the original Santos design was actually made for Alberto Santos Dumont, gentleman pilot and a personal friend of Louis Cartier. And those bolts actually evoke the riveted plates on the planes from the period. So that's where those exposed screws in the Santos design come from. And on the models that come with a bracelet, of course, those are accentuated by the screws on the discrete links of the bracelet as well. Here we have a platinum example that comes on the bracelets, the Santos Octagon, with a black onyx dial that has diamonds as the hour markers. Again, a watch that's in a well-preserved state. Platine, as you can see on the back. Platinum. Case and bracelets. 30 millimeters in diameter, and with a black onyx dial that is diamond set for the indices. Lot 917 with a pre-auction estimate set in the range between 7 to 10,000 in US dollars. Please hit the like button as I am going through the very interesting and certainly singular watch collection of Eric Clapton through the pieces that are going on sale in February from Christie's New York. There are the usual suspects from Cartier and Chopin, even though they are always also unique. Here's the link, by the way, if you want to take a look at it yourself. And if you have any particular requests or any other watch-related questions, you can always feel free to send a message with a super chat identifying either the lot number or your question. I'd be more than happy to help you. We were saying that there are usual suspects from Cartier and Chopin, but also some other horologically interesting pieces and aesthetically pleasing pieces from Roger Dubuis, Alain Gonzone, Gégé Lecoutre, and many others. Here's again one of the usual suspects, Cartier Tonneau, a barrel-shaped piece from Cartier Paris in platinum. The dimensions are beautiful as well. 26 by 46. A 90s piece in platinum. Beautiful beaded crown to go with the dressy aesthetic of the piece, topped off with a sapphire cabochon. The silver dial has a beautiful guilloche pattern that emanates outwards from under the hand stack, that imaginary center point of the dial. Beautiful Cartier Paris signature on the dial with elongated Roman numerals that are practically the calling card of Cartier as a brand when it comes to watches. And this is a beautiful two-hander with a handset in the sword style, heat blued, fashioned of stainless steel. Once again, barring minor scratches and a few nicks here and there, the watch is in a pretty cool condition. Very beautiful looking. And again, at least at the level of the estimate, seemingly reasonable. The platinum case is matched with an 18-karat white gold déployant clasp. This is lot 922 for a Cartier Paris Tonneau in platinum. The pre-auction estimates is between 12,000 to 18,000 in US dollars. Speaking of tasting the rainbow from earlier, here's a very interesting piece, a Piaget piece that is perhaps the most colorful of these watches, even though they are quite extravagant and flamboyant in their own ways, being almost always precious metal. A great majority of them being, again, gem sets. But this one kind of takes the cake. Piaget Tanagra, a pièce unique, a one-of-a-kind example with a diamond pavé dial and with a case and bracelet that is set with multicolored gemstones all over. The case and bracelet is itself in 18 karat in 18 karat yellow gold. Excuse me. And the watch is quartz powered. The case diameter is right around 33.5 millimeters in diameter. The piece is in fact inscribed on the back, engraved on the back, with the phrase pièce unique, one of a kind. That was lot 326 with an estimated value between 12,000 to 18,000 US dollars. At lot 395, we have a Cartier Santos Carré, case and bracelets in 18 karat yellow gold. This one, unlike so many other pieces in the collection, actually has aftermarket diamonds. Still looks quite interesting. The original watch has a reference number 2964 from the 90s. Santos Carré, the more squared version, of the Santos. Lot 395 has an estimated value that is between 15,000 to 20,000 in US dollars. There are two more interesting tank models that are designated as possibly unique, which is something, unfortunately, that auction houses do way too often for it to mean anything significant. But I have to say, these do look like very rare pieces, possibly done on demand, bespoke, you might say. This is actually from Cartier London, from the London branch. Understood to be from the 80s. And looks quite exquisite. Again, you have a beautiful dial with the distinctive stylized and slightly elongated Roman numerals, a railroad track for the minutes at the center of the dial that follows the rectangular shape of the case, stainless steel hands for the hour and minutes that are heat blued, and then you have this beautiful setting on the bezel and the hooded lugs with baguette cut rubies and diamonds. The beaded crown is set with ruby cabochon as well. Here's a look at this Cartier London tank from the profile. And as you can see, the case, it has those cutouts on the back and on the sides that give it a very distinct feel and that frame the dial from the front and the back in a very distinctive manner. This is lot 324, a very rare, if not one of a kind, tank from Cartier London. The piece itself is in platinum and it is set with baguette cut rubies and diamonds on the bezel and the hooded lugs, with a beautiful ruby cabochon on its crown. This piece has a pre-auction estimate that is set in the range between 15,000 to 25,000 in US dollars. A similar piece, this time Tank Normal at lot 308. No, sorry, lot number 38. Tank Normal is perhaps having a little bit of a moment at this point, no less because Cartier released some very interesting versions, very appealing limited editions at the last Watches and Wonders. This is a case that is rendered in 18 karat white gold, 23 millimeters wide and 39 millimeters long. The dial is basically made of baguette cut blue sapphires in this grid-like structure, 16 of them, and both the bezel and the lugs are set with baguette cut diamonds. The octagonal crown itself is topped off with a multifaceted diamond there. What a beautiful and unique piece. Of course, the Tank Normal is one of those tank designs that, unsurprisingly, of course, because it is closer to the original, reflects that inspiration, that design inspiration Louis Cartier had after having seen the Renault tanks from the World War I era on the pages of a journal, or so the story goes. A very unique and distinctive watch, possibly one of a kind, as they mention it here, but absolutely singular in either case. This is a Cartier Paris Tank Normal in 18 karat white gold with a dial made out of 16 baguette cut blue sapphires and a case that is set with baguette cut diamonds. Apparently, the matching déployant clasp is similarly set with diamonds as well. Again, the case is 23 by 39. Very nice and wearable dress watch. When it comes to that, a lot 38 has an estimated value between 20,000 to 30,000 US dollars. Once again, all these watches, all 30 of them, belong to the Elton John collection, which Christie's is selling. This is kind of an estate sale, resulting from Sir Elton John's move from Atlanta after having sold his condo at Peach Tree Road. And the collection is divided to 6 distinct events. I think some of them live, some of them online events. In either case, the watches are not separately listed necessarily. Of course, you always have an option to submit your bids from distance or online once you register with Christie's. Nevertheless, there's no separate watch auction, but you can see the link in the chat. I posted it a couple of times, but let me post it again if you need. I basically reached this list by simply ticking only the watches category. There's going to be an exhibition in conjunction with this sale, Goodbye Peachtree Road at Rockefeller, Christie's, New York, between February 6th to the 21st. And the sale itself goes from February 6th to the end of the month, all the sales rather. Yeah, we have 2 more lots left. So if you have any burning questions about this auction or anything watch related, you might as well squeeze it in right now. If you would like to simply contribute to the channel in any shape or form, of course, you are more than welcome to. The memberships in and of themselves can be interesting because they will give you access to exclusive content that is shared in the form of market digests, 3 new videos every week. And since those market digests are always with a particular horological focus, packed with interesting historical and technical information, they also have a certain, I want to say, lasting value. So it's something to consider. And in either case, I really cherish your support and presence here. I do appreciate every single click, all the thumbs up, all the likes, all the views. If you would also subscribe, and if you have subscribed, send the link around to other watch enthusiasts and collectors. That would be lovely. Again, this is a channel that doesn't serve as a mouthpiece for any industry interests. I don't work for any auction houses. I only represent you. I speak for you. I look out for your interest. That also means I'm at your behest. I don't have any sponsors because it allows me to serve my audience and my audience only. And any contribution you makes this platform possible and help us expand and energize this community built simply around passion for and knowledge of horology. So let's take a look at the last 2 lots that I've identified. One of them is a Rolex Cosmograph Daytona, namely the version known to us as the Leopard. Tiff Nadell says, what an amazing collector to bring their pieces to market, Eric Clapton being the other. You know, you're right. I do appreciate that. Not necessarily maybe in the manner of gratitude. With Eric Clapton, the situation is a little different because his status as a collector of watches and as a as an arbiter of taste in a way in the realm of horology is a little different compared to Eric Clapton, and much more widely appreciated. But in each case, whenever something out of their collection goes on sale, on auction, or comes back to the market, we discover something new about those personalities and about those watches, of course. But we get to learn something about that individual, about their sense of style, about their tastes through these pieces, and that's always something that I appreciate. Even if in this particular case I don't always, perhaps, personally like and appreciate every single piece. I appreciate the fact that it is out there and that it allows us to learn about the individual in some way. The Leopard Daytona was launched in 2004, and it has the reference number 116598 Sacco. A very distinct piece, very flamboyant with its leopard dial beyond even before we even get into the gem setting. A lot of these watches apparently bear the K serial number, dating them back to actually 2001, which is the case with this lot as well. So presumably they made some of them in advance and perhaps even hesitated to bring them into the market, or maybe simply offered them to a very limited circle of their clients. The piece is, of course, in 18 karat yellow gold and features 48 brilliant cut diamonds set into the lugs, 36 square cut orange sapphires, as you can see, set into the bezel. The hour markers are also diamonds set on the leopard print dial. The same leopard print is also used for the leather strap to give a certain coherent aesthetic to this timepiece. The 36 orange sapphires altogether weigh approximately 5 carats, and the 56 brilliant diamonds amount to 1.5 carats altogether. The word on the street was, the rumor was that this piece was designed for the CEO's girlfriend at the time, and that CEO is not another, any other CEO, as you guys know. I'm talking about Patrick Heinegger, who had a 16-year tenure between 1992 to 2008, taking over from his father. As you guys know, the CEO position in Rolex is very distinct, very interesting, very different from everyone else. That has something to do with the status of the company, of course, since it's not a publicly traded company, but essentially organized as a charitable foundation. But that situation also has a lot to do with the fact that between 1905 and 2000, company was essentially led by three men, two of whom were a father and son duo, right? With Andre Heinige taking over from Hans Wilsdorf and Patrick Heinige taking over from him. So right now, the Dufour, Jean-Frédéric Dufour, has had relatively stable term since 2014, but in the last few years, there have been so many changes before Dufour especially, and changes in quick succession with that position for Rolex, that it's sometimes hard to lose, it's sometimes easy to lose sight of how it was a very interesting position, in the sense that obviously it wasn't something like an ownership. The foundation still had a lot to do with how the company was led and guided. But these were very strong characters, very strong men. And, even though it's just a rumor, it does make for an interesting story and a believable story that the Leopard came about, was created kind of at the whim of Patrick Heinige's girlfriend, which may or may not be true. But I'm just sharing. Hopefully, I won't get anyone angry by sharing this, but it is something of an open secret at any rate. But yeah, this is a very interesting, but also somewhat predictable piece to find in the Elton John collection. Rolex Cosmograph Daytona, reference 116598, Sacco, an 18-karat yellow gold version of the Daytona with the leopard print dial and a leather band to match. Diamonds are set for the hour markers. They also are set into the lugs, and 36 square cut orange sapphires frame the dial in the form of a setting into the bezel. This is the Daytona Leopard, or the Leopard Daytona. It is lot 9 of this auction, with an estimated value between $40,000 to $60,000. I've saved what I presented on my thumbnail for the last. Incidentally, this is also something of a highlight, even within this collection. Even within the larger collection, it's one of those pieces that make it to the opening nights. I mentioned again, this broader sale, of course, has so much more than just watches, about a total of an estimated $10 million value. It can be much more, as you guys know. So it's divided into 6 distinct sales. but 30 watches are dispersed among those sales, and I tried to focus tonight with some help from St. Peter in the beginning to highlight some of my selections from this collection that is going on sale next month at Christie's, New York. Check it out. There's going to be an exhibition as well for part of the month. This is a Paris crash, so to speak, which was produced in a limited run of 400 examples, released in 1991. In 18 carats yellow gold with a hand mount movement. Of course, that distinctive asymmetric case and dial that harkens back to surrealist art, especially Salvador Dali's paintings of melting clocks, perhaps more specifically the persistence of memory. There are other apocryphal stories about its origin, which are kind of tangled up in the naming of the model, Crash. So some have made up this story that the design actually came from Cartier Maxi Baignoire Allongé, which is a very specific design. So the idea was that there was a car crash where someone was wearing this watch, and the watch came out deformed in a certain way from this crash and became the design. Of course, none of these are exactly true, even though the surrealist origins of the design, the surrealist inspiration of the design, I think, cannot be altogether denied. The origin of the watch is from the London branch in 1960s, and it is a collaboration between Jean-Jacques Cartier and the designer Rupert Emerson. The example you're looking at is a 90s remake, reissue from the Paris branch, from the Paris house of Cartier, in yellow gold, one of 400 examples from around 1991. Of course, as you guys know, the crash has also a similarly quote-unquote misshapen déployant clasp that goes with it. It's not pictured here, but it's worth showing because it reflects beautifully the design aesthetic of the piece. As you can see, this is how it looks from behind and from the déployant clasp. This piece has really captured a lot of the hype around it, and perhaps was integral in pulling the entire Cartier market upwards with it. Of course, the original London ones, when they can be found, are even more desirable, but one of this 400-piece limited run from the Paris house is also coveted. This is lot 12 from the Sir Elton John collection, or the collection of Sir Elton John. Cartier Paris Crash from the 1991 reissue, one of 400 in 18 karat yellow gold, with those distinctive deformed and elongated Roman numerals that still bear all the hallmarks of Cartier that we became used to in the contemporary era, such as the secret signature at 7 o'clock, silvered dial with heat-blued sword-styled hands, sapphire cabochon on the beaded crown that I think matches beautifully those heat-blued hands. And this yellow gold piece is powered by Jaeger-LeCoultre based hand-wound movement. The pre-auction estimate is set in the range between 70,000 to 100,000 in US dollars. All right, guys, thank you so much. Tonight we have covered this special auction, Elton John's watches that are going on sale as part of his larger estate sale, you might say, resulting from his move from Peachtree Road, resulting from the sale of his condo in Atlanta last year. There were about 30 lots of horological interest. A lot of usual suspects, perhaps. Gem set pieces from prominent jewelry houses such as Cartier and Chopard, but also some other items of horological interest made by Vacheron Constantin, by Alain Gonzone, by Jaeger-LeCoultre, by Frank Muller, and Roger Dubuis. It's a pretty interesting collection, and most importantly, it's a collection that reflects the singular taste and distinctive and flamboyant sense of style of none other than the Rocket Man himself. It's going to be pretty interesting to see how these watches actually sell. Because again, as I mentioned before, on the one hand, it's like an auctioneer's wet dream to have this sort of crossover event, you know, where you can gather together in the same room, even if it is in 6 different events, people who are so invested in a pop culture icon. So ultimately, that should play an important role in driving up some of these prices, even though the estimates are by and large conservative. On the other hand, perhaps that expectation is tempered by the fact that a lot of these watches won't readily appeal on people who are interested in wristwatches, who are collectors of wristwatches, and to, again, do another fold or unfold something that I have just said. Yet again, a lot of these pieces are those pieces that have become quite popular and desirable over the last few years, especially the ones that we were looking at in the manner of Cartier designs, the single button monopusher chronograph in the tortue shape, of course, the crash, the variations of the tank. And quite frankly, by and large, at least among a certain segment of collectors, I feel there's also an increasing, a burgeoning interest in watches that are not only smaller, but also perhaps more flamboyant, maybe slightly more feminine, gem sets. It's for that reason, it's hard to tell what kind of buyer these watches will attract. Some of them might actually sell for very interesting amounts, but I'm not sure how significant the effect of that celebrity stardust would be specifically on these watches. Because again, like we were talking earlier, certainly a lot of people would be interested at least in some of these watches, even if they weren't interested in watches in general, because of the association of these pieces to Elton John. On the other hand, like we have seen with a lot of watches that have been sold from Andy Warhol's collection, they have sold more compared to some of the, more civilian, if not pedestrian, examples of similar models or of the same reference. But they haven't really brought the kind of premium that is attached to, let's say, the proper names such as Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, so on and so forth. So it's an interesting question, and it's one that I will follow and that I will most certainly get back to in February once the results of these 6 distinct sales, among which the watches are dispersed, as soon as they start coming in February, we'll talk more about it. Until then, don't forget to hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Share the link with everyone. And if you want to support the stream, if you want to contribute to it, the links are included in the description box. Until the next one, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. Take care.